Good afternoon, everybody. It's Sri Rajagopalan, President and CEO of Murano Corporation. Welcome to Cloud Computing webinar. Supply chains are inherently very inefficient. There's a lot of inefficiencies when businesses buy from other businesses and businesses sell between businesses. And our mission is to make supply chains more streamlined, more resilient, integrated, and efficient. And that's what we call RISE framework. And we want to make supply chains more efficient and streamlined. And we do that with our cloud-based supply chain manager. And it's a next-generation ERP, but it's more than just an ERP. It's an ERP for supply chains. And we cater to businesses big and small, and we want to make technology affordable to small companies because we believe they have problems that even larger companies have, but they just can't afford the big price tag of these larger ERP systems. So we want to make cloud technology more affordable and ERP technology and supply chain integration technology more affordable to smaller companies. And as a result, we want businesses to focus on their core operation and simplify their operations and implement RISE supply chains. And for larger companies that have legacy systems, legacy ERP systems, we want to help them switch from old technology, old antiquated ERP systems to new, more modern cloud-based systems, such as Supply Chain Manager. And Supply Chain Manager is what we call a cloud supply chain resource planning software. It includes all the core ERP modules like finance, sales, purchasing, manufacturing, HR, etc. But in addition, we also have an online B2B marketplace, big data and analytics is included, supplier relationship management, supply chain visibility and integration. It also includes an integrated job portal, and then finally, customer relationship management. So that's what we call a supply chain resource planning software. So it exceeds what a traditional ERP software includes, but it includes more than just a pure ERP software. So that's what we call ourselves, supply chain manager, supply chain resource planning software. So the key takeaways from this talk today are as follows. The first thing is speed. Cloud gives you speed. Gone are the days when it takes years and years to implement an ERP system. So we want to be able to do this fast, and cloud can help you do this fast. So one thing I want you guys to remember is you can do a lot more things faster and cheaper with cloud technologies. For example, small and medium-sized enterprises can automate their operations in 3 months or less. And Fortune 1000 companies, what can they do? So they can rapidly automate growth market business units. So since they've already invested significant amount of money and capital in their legacy ERP systems, they now have the opportunity to make cloud-based systems for their growth markets. They don't necessarily have to implement this heavy, slow, and complex on-premise ERP systems for the growth markets, but they can also implement cloud-based solutions for those growth markets. The second thing they can do is their option is to deploy a complementary cloud app. So the traditional ERP systems doesn't meet all their requirements. So there are lots of complementary cloud apps that can be used as a bolt-on to their legacy ERP system. They can use that, they can implement that as a complementary solution to their legacy ERP system. But the key point is for Fortune 1000 companies, enterprise companies, is to stop investing more in legacy ERP technology. It's old, antiquated, and it's time for them to stop digging and to look into more alternate, more modern solutions to meet their needs, things that are technology that is faster, cheaper, and easier to implement. The third key takeaway that I want to share is the fact that integration is the holy grail. What do I mean by that? Enterprises that are not integrated, meaning they have separate systems, separate technologies for sales, manufacturing, purchasing, etc., that don't talk to each other, they struggle. They have a tough time. They have a tough time reacting to market forces. They have a tough time reacting to customer demand and changes in the marketplace. So integration is very, very critical. Integration internally, but then also integration externally with your trading partners is critical. And that's why enterprises, big and small, need to really look into having an integrated enterprise. And the fourth thing is related to the third point, which is to establish an integrated and resilient supply chain network of the future. And then finally, if you're a supply chain professional, cloud is your best friend. You can do a lot of things in the cloud which you couldn't do before. Inherently, it breaks down the silos, the information silos that you have in various organizations, and between trading partners. It breaks it down so you can do a lot more things. Information can be sent back and forth faster. You can reduce duplication of effort. You can reduce errors and reduce inefficiencies that way. So these are the key takeaways from this talk today. Now, people ask you, so what is cloud computing and what's not cloud computing, right? So cloud computing is when your core suppliers have early and easy, accurate, and real-time access to your forecast and inventory. So if they can access your forecast information, if they have access to your inventory information, that is cloud computing. And this is from a supply chain perspective. But if they don't have visibility to your information and inventory, or if you use EDI, then it's not cloud computing. The second thing is when your vice president of supply chain is traveling, and then they can't access the KPIs in real time while traveling, but they instead have to contact you, then it's not cloud computing. But when they can access it themselves on their mobile device in a secure fashion, and get real-time updates on what's happening in the enterprise, then it's cloud computing. Companies divest, companies merge all the time. So when you can easily merge or divest businesses, then it's cloud computing. When it's not, you need an army of consultants, then it's not cloud computing. And last but not the least, the key thing that I want to stress here is that multi-tenant cloud applications is where you want to look at. When you take your information or your ERP system, put it on a remote data center, that's not cloud. It needs to be multi-tenant cloud system, multi-tenant system, and that's what true cloud computing is. So here's the agenda that we have for today. First, we're going to cover the supply chain headaches remedied with cloud computing. So what are the key supply chain headaches, and that can be addressed by cloud computing. Second is we'll give you a case study. And then third, we'll talk about what are the options for Fortune 1000 enterprise cloud options. And time permitting, we'll go through the last 2 points, which is the supply chain network of the future and 7 steps to successful cloud adoption. So we'll see based on the time, we'll cover that. We'll leave some time for Q&A at the end as well. So here's a question for you, all you folks on the call today. What causes bullwhip effect in supply chains? So bullwhip effect is where uncertainty in a supply chain forces your trading partners to build up inventory, safety stock levels. That's what a bullwhip effect is exactly as the chart shows. And what really causes that? So is it A, B, C, D, or E? So we get an E, that's the correct answer. So E is the correct answer. So the key here is the lack of synchronization among supply chain members is critical. Supply patterns do not match demand patterns, that's true, and lack of collaboration, communication between supply chain members. And all these A, B, C, D, the answer is E, right answer is E, that's what causes bullwhip effect. And as you can see here, the collaboration, lack of information silos, information exchange, that's what's causing this. That's the key thing. And that leads us to the next slide in terms of the key challenges, key headaches that are experienced by supply chain professionals. Number one among them is the fact that there's part shortages. Part shortages, supply chain professionals, they don't have the right parts at the right time when they really need it. That's the critical thing that's bedeviling the supply chain professionals. And then because of that, you might have a production shutdown, worst case scenario. Worst case scenario, there your customer might pass down line down costs. If you're an automotive business, Ford's line shuts down because they didn't have the right component on time. They could pass on millions of dollars of line down costs back to the supplier, right? So what's the medicine for this? It's supply chain visibility. Supply chain visibility is key. And how do you measure this, right? The inventory turns. If inventory turns is too high, then you don't have enough stock. If it's too low, then you have slow-moving, obsolete stock, right? So that's what the first key headache is. The second thing is the customer demand. Customer demand varies. There's a lot of volatility. There's seasonality involved, and you need to buy raw materials, right? So raw materials that affects the cost of goods sold. So my question to you guys: why can't we have an online marketplace to kind of smooth this volatility and stabilize the prices? and get access to lower prices and more options for purchasing. Some of the cases, I understand some of the components that you buy, you have specialized services, specialized suppliers that you have relationships with, but a lot of times you could possibly look into online marketplaces where you could get sources from supplies from multiple sources. So that positively affects the gross margin. The third thing is invoicing errors, and invoicing errors are very, very common. And why can't we have e-invoicing, right? Electronic invoicing, and why can't we have spend analysis associated with that so that we can analyze your spend more effectively? So the way to monitor is the direct spend here. And then finally, air freight charges. And one way to measure this is whether you're delivering goods to your customers on time in full. Is that something that comes from period constraints? So do you measure your deliveries on time in full? Is that a metric that you measure? So these are the key headaches that supply chain professionals really grapple with on a day-to-day basis. And let's talk about how a case study that we have, how they addressed some of these issues. So what we found is that more and more the companies in Asia Pacific, so they are coming from a greenfield perspective. What do I mean by that? They're coming from spreadsheets or something like QuickBooks, and they're growing fast, and they don't have the legacy technology that the U.S. companies are burdened with, or European companies are burdened with. They've implemented SAP and Oracle and JD Edwards, etc. They've spent millions on it. So for them to switch over from some of these systems to cloud-based technology is more complicated and more difficult than with these Asian competitors. So this particular company is based in Mumbai, and they export to all across the world. They export to Middle East, they export to Spain, Europe, New Zealand, etc. And they are an electrical device manufacturing company. And their forecast-to-cash process in the past, this is how it was. This is a legacy forecast-to-cash process. It was very manual, very time-consuming, and if you can see, so they used to create production targets. It was very arbitrary because they didn't have a good track of what the historical sales was, what the seasonality was. So they didn't have an effective S&OP process, and it was all in the general manager's head. So he used to come up with the target production for the next month. And then they used to manually create production orders and purchase orders, and then share this with suppliers and production staff. So as a result, it was arbitrary, like I said, manual, time-consuming. They had way too much inventory, and the general manager's biggest concern was making sure safety stocks. He was obsessed with safety stock. He said, all we want to care, we ensure that we don't want to run out of stocks, run out of raw materials for production, and they had lots of slow-moving, obsolete inventory, raw materials. So this was their process, and after implementing our cloud-based supply chain manager, it became considerably more streamlined. So everything was more integrated, automated. So they took their sales forecast, and that fed the operations plan, and the operations plan became a production plan, and then they executed MRP to generate purchase orders and purchase requisitions and planned orders. And then from there, with one click, it went to to suppliers, became a purchase order, which went to suppliers, and then so on and so forth. So it was integrated. All these were integrated, all handled by supply chain manager. It was not a collection of spreadsheets. And then it was more accurate, considerably more accurate. Their raw material inventory levels considerably reduced. So they had more cash on hand, affected their gross margins and all that. And it was more efficient. So they had more timely information. They were able to access information on a more timely basis. So considerable improvements in terms of a process improvement and integration. So going back to what I said earlier about integration being the holy grail, they are reaping the benefits of that right now. So quickly, I want to touch, now that we're talking about forecast-to-cash process, I want to quickly touch on the factors that can affect sales forecast. So a quick question to the audience here. What is the right answer here for what factors can affect sales forecast? Is it A, sales demand patterns, B, economic conditions, C, competitor actions, D, market research, E, product mixes, F, pricing and promotional activities, or G, all of the above. So yes, so G is the right answer. Yes, absolutely right. G is the right answer. As part of the forecasting process, you have to really include all these factors. Many companies, I run across many companies where they just look at the historical sales to predict or to forecast what they're going to be building for the future. But as you all know, historical sales is not a true 100% indicator of what you should be building for the future. So you have to factor in seasonality, competitor actions, all these things that we talked about. So the point here is that you need to open the aperture and look at factors beyond pure historical sales. All right, so at this point, I wanted to see if there are open up for any questions from the audience, any questions that we have at this point. So while the questions are coming, let's talk about in the case of big companies, so what are the options for big companies? And we'll talk about that in a second. So let me just get to that part, the Fortune 1000 companies. So Fortune 1000 companies, this is what they are struggling with. They're struggling with the fact that the growth markets is where the business is growing, right? So they have two options. You know, they can either implement their legacy ERP systems, which is very complex, like I said, and time-consuming to implement, and but the local markets are saying we want something that's more tailored to our requirements, right? So, but the challenge there is the legacy ERP. The legacy ERP is a challenge for them. The second thing is the downward price pressure. So in the developed markets, there's a deflationary tendency that's happening. The prices are going down. So the operational efficiency is something that they're pursuing. And again, the challenge is legacy ERP. And the third is operational agility. They cannot move fast enough. They cannot buy companies or divest companies, businesses fast enough. And that's where the cloud technology comes in, right? The cloud technology can help you do things faster, and the legacy ERP is a challenge here. So as a large company, this is how complex organizational hierarchies are set up. So they have a global headquarters, they have the core operations in developed markets, and they have some good strategic business units in their local markets. But in the international markets, they have some companies, some countries where they have only sales-only operations, like the Middle East, for example. But in other parts like Vietnam, they might have sales and manufacturing country operations. So this is what a multinational company looks like, their footprint. And most of these companies multinationals have multiple software vendors, multiple software instances, and multiple versions of these software. And most of this is making them slow, heavy, complex, and paralyzing. So it's a huge challenge for them. So what are the options? This is what we call a global enterprise software model. So it's combining global with local. So this is where they can grow their markets. It's faster, leaner, and simpler. So they have legacy systems at their global headquarters. Core operations is legacy. And the growth strategic business units are on cloud, and international is also on cloud. So the advantages here is that you normalize or rationalize the number of ERP instances, the number of versions are fewer, things are faster, leaner. It's much more simpler landscape than what they have. And IT is a true enabler than what it's been before. Okay. Now, if you're not talking about multinationals, they have only operations in developed markets, then a complementary bolt-on or an application like a source-to-pay process would be a perfect fit for global organizations, larger organizations that want to get their feet into the cloud world. So take a look at the source-to-pay process. This is a source-to-pay process of a typical multinational company. So they have to deal with strategic sourcing, contract management, requisitions, purchasing, financials, and spend analysis. The legacy ERP systems typically handles only purchasing and financials. So they don't handle the other four pieces in this pie. And as a result, they're dealing with spreadsheets, and it's not integrated, and they're not able to do spend analysis really well, for example. So what we're proposing is using a cloud-based solution like such as a supply chain manager with its strong source-to-pay process, which is integrated, that can complement their legacy ERP system, and that they can use this to to implement as a cloud-based solution, as a complementary solution. All right, so the final piece of integration that we want to talk about was the integration across all 4 layers here. So this is what we call an ISA 95, this ISA 95 chart. An ISA is a consortium, and they come up with standards. ISA 95 is a standard that talks about integration across your business software, business planning software, and across your manufacturing systems. And they have come up with 4 levels, and what they're talking about is integration across all these things. And this integration is also critical to having a good picture of what's happening on your manufacturing floor and combining that with information on the business systems and back office systems. So this is also very critical. So when I talked about integration as a holy grail, this is the last mile of integration. You want to have integration across all the pieces, including the manufacturing systems and across your trading partner companies. So that's the critical thing. The supply chain network of the future. So let's talk about Walmart, for example. Walmart's revenues. So take a look at the revenues, where they were in 1989. They were like Kmart and Sears. And look at how much their revenues jumped from 1989 to 2012. Revenues went up from $25 billion to $447 billion over that period of time. Now look at where Kmart and Sears is. Now, one of the things that Walmart did, which Target and Kmart and Sears did not do, was that they offered their sales data and inventory data with their suppliers. So what they did was they shared critical sales and consumption data with their suppliers through something called Retail Link. Now, what we want to talk about is extending that. So that's what's called external demand collaboration, right? So that they're collaborating with the suppliers. The suppliers know more about what's happening with the customers. They are able to reduce the bullwhip effect or minimize the bullwhip effect. And if you want to take a step further, if you want to go a step further, why can't we share product specs, of course, with your trusted trading partners, that is, trusted trading partners that are core to your business and strategic to you? Why can't we share product specs, sales forecasts, material demand, inventory, shipments, capacity, transactions, return, etc.? So there's a term for this. This is called collaborative planning, fulfillment, and replenishment, or CPFR. And that's the term they use, collaborative planning, fulfillment, replenishment. And that is possible with a multi-tenant cloud solution. A multi-tenant cloud solution makes this possible, this CPFR possible. And that's the key message. So integration with your supply chain, and this gives you a supply chain network of the future. You're implementing collaborative planning, fulfillment, and replenishment, CPFR, with your supply chain partners, core trading partners. You can minimize inefficiencies in supply chain, improve your businesses, and simulate what Walmart has done with its partners, and that is grow your business tremendously. So this level of collaboration is possible only if you have a multi-tenant cloud system, cloud solution, and that's the supply chain manager is a perfect example of that. And everybody knows Amazon. Amazon is the other big competitor of a retailer. Amazon has been growing gangbusters. But how many of you knew that Amazon sells 2.2 million products from 17 different categories to businesses? We all know they sell to consumers. We buy books and electronic items from Amazon. But how many of you know that they sell to businesses as well? Now, Amazon, what they have done is they have essentially constructed this, what I talked about earlier, internally from the ground up. Now, they have the luxury of doing it. They're big. They have done that. They've invested and spent a considerable amount of money in building this. So they've built this completely in-house where they are able to exchange information with their suppliers, the CPFR and all those things that we talked about, components. They are able to do that. That's the reason they can deliver, or they're promising to deliver goods to your doorstep in 2 hours or less, right? They are able to do that because A, they have an integrated platform, and B, they have integration with your trading partners. Right? Those are the critical things that's allowing them to do these things, and that's why they're able to beat the competition. And with supply chain management, we have we are offering similar level of technology at affordable prices to smaller companies. So the key point I want to highlight here is, for a supply chain network of the future, integration is the key, integration internally and integration externally with your supply chain partners. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to see if there are any questions. If there are any questions from the audience, any questions? All right, so finally, so to close up, just to recap, the key takeaways from this talk today were, the first thing was that the speed with which cloud technology can help small and medium enterprises automate their internal operations, right? It's tremendous amount of speed that it offers at affordable prices. Second thing is that for bigger companies, so if you're not a small company, if you're a big company, what are your options? Well, your options are, you can look at a growth market as a possible candidate for cloud technology, or look at a complementary cloud app for something like a source-to-pay process. And then number 3 factor is the supply chain piece and the integration there. Integration is the holy grail. Integration is very critical, integration within your enterprise and integration across the enterprise, supply chain. And build a resilient supply chain network of the future. So those are the key points. And then finally, if you're a supply chain professional, cloud is your best friend. So unless there are no other questions for today, that brings this webinar to an end. I'll wait for a couple more minutes if you have any questions or comments. Otherwise, thank you everybody for your time.